for that young man who is being tempted by that, who sees the Arnold or sees what are the modern equivalents, Jason Momoa or something, whoever is around these days. And they see those guys and they're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to look like that. It's when you start really looking and saying, hey, I've done everything I could to get to that, and I still am not getting bigger. And you just need to be bigger. And so now I'm going to, maybe shirk some of my responsibilities with the fast, or I'm going to start looking for those shortcuts. You start asking, hey, what's going on here? It's a question you have to ask internally on that front of, what is my goal? Why do I need to be that big? So for the young man at home, ask yourself that question. What is it I'm doing this for? Am I getting strong for it to improve my pride, or am I doing it to be able to be of service to other people?
Welcome, everybody, to The Body Aesthetic. My name is Matthew. It's my joy to have Dr. Michael Christian on the show today. Michael is a functional health and nutrition consultant and a doctor of health sciences. His brand is Orthodox Health, a faith-based resource. So that's a tongue twister. Faith-based resource that integrates dietary and health practices and spiritual goals. You can check it out at orthodoxhealth.com. He also has a YouTube podcast under the same name. I'll have all the links down in the description below, so go check it out. Give him a sub and support a fellow brother. So, Dr. Michael, thanks for coming on the show. In addition to my corporate plug of your services, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the Orthodox Health brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. And so, like you said, Orthodox Health is my current endeavor. It grew out of years and years and years in multiple domains of the health space. And so initially was coming out of a strength and conditioning and out of a combative martial arts background. And then I got into nutrition after reading the Paleo Solution when it first came out, and got really deep dove into the ancestral space. And then eventually kind of felt that the meta narrative around the ancestral idea, the evolutionary narrative, without going too deep down that, was no longer feasible once I found orthodoxy. And so to that degree, ended up saying, all right, well, this orthodox stuff really is still an ancestral approach. There's a lot of really cool information here. I've been intermittent fasting for quite a long time. I like this. And it was at that point when I was looking into orthodoxy that I was working on my doctoral work, changed my doctoral thesis to a comparative analysis of our ascetic practices with other religious and secular modalities. So I did our fasting compared to 16/8 and other types of secular intermittent fasting and Ramadan fasting. And then our hesychastic prayer, the Jesus prayer, compared to yoga, meditation, mindfulness-based stress reduction as the religious and secular ends. And so to that degree, basically was saying, hey, Christianity has been doing this for 2,000 years. Western Christian, you've lost this idea. And so we don't need to go out and look into all these either super scientific or new age modalities. We can actually go back to what the church has taught us. And so that ended up becoming my core focus. And as I was telling Matthew before we got on, that at the time I was reading the Philokalia as an inquirer because I was doing both my work and coming into the church at the same time, that I realized it was way up on my pay grade. So once I got out and through my doctorate, I kind of was in this weird space of, well, I can't promote the ancestral approach as the primary key, or the paleo primal version of the ancestral approach as the answer. But I also am way too new of an Orthodox Christian to be speaking about these, but I can't really view health in any other paradigm than what we have from the fathers at this point. So what do I do? And then eventually it was Pascha of last year, really clean Monday, really cheese fair of last year. I'd been ranting and raving with my wife, or ranting about orthodoxy and health for a long time. And my wife was like, you need to just start a podcast or something. And so
talk to someone else. Stop talking to me about it.
Pretty much. Yeah. Like, can you just go rant out into the ether about this? And maybe somebody will listen, maybe they won't, but you don't have to hear it you anymore. Yeah. And so I reached out to my good friend, John, who me and him come back from the MMA world. We go back, 15 years at that point, and we asked for a blessing from our priests and got it. And then literally within a week. We recorded in the first episode like 2 days later, and we released it on the 8th day from its conception. So there's something to that. I don't know what it means, especially because it landed, the first episode came out on Clean Monday. So it was both aspects of that. It's that we got it out at the very beginning of Lent, and also it was the 8th day from its conception. So there's something there. I don't know what, but
we need Pageau on the case to analyze the
exactly.
symbology.
Yeah, right. We'll get Jonathan and Father Deacon Seraphim on it.
There you go. Yeah, I also went down the primal path, and it's actually really fascinating. This kind of leads into the discussion today because, in the secular sense, we talk about the primal ancestral diet and lifestyle, as ancient nomadic humans or whatever. But our adherence to, let's say, the church fast, which what my priest refers to it as a paradisical diet. So it's mimicking the diet of paradise. Like, what is more ancient and ancestral and primal than literally the origin point of humanity? So that is the true primal diet. It's the fasting diet.
And completely agree. And that's really it, is that once the paradigm changes for our anthropology, it completely changes how you view health. And so it's one of those where, to give it a little bit of a hot take on that front, there is a lot of debate on what the age of the earth is, or whether evolution's real, and this, that, and the other. And it's one of those for me where it's like, I'm not going to have to take a solid stance on that, but it really does change the way you view health, depending on which side of the equation you come down on. And for me, it's like, no, as you said, this is the paradisical diet, is the way we were before the fall. We go through this process. Obviously, things changed after the fall. We are allowed to have meat. And I do believe that nutritionally, meat is the superior food overall, but we are giving up a good for a better good by going through the fast. All that to say is there are patterns of both that we can incorporate. And if we are going to try to learn how to eat properly, going back to the way it was is the best way. Like what God has designed. If nothing else, eat food that is as close to the way that God designed it as possible is the simplest way of putting it. Goes to the old school, eat real food, right? But what does that mean, right?
Right. And the cycles of the church, kind of the way it's set up is cycles of fasting and feasting, right? Because like you said, we are in a post-fall world, so we do eat meat, right? And we do need meat nutritionally speaking. So like it's cycles, right? That's why the church, we don't fast 365. We fast, probably half of the year, maybe a little bit more, but versus like the carnivore diet, where it's like literally the complete opposite of fasting. It's like I only eat meat. I don't, and that is 90% of my diet, more. So a lot of interesting spiritual implications there. I do want to talk about that, but to start us off, I have been thinking of a different, sort of a different aspect of the idea of man in the garden in paradise and our relationship with food. It relates to our spiritual relationship with God as well. But I've been contemplating the fact that the first sin of man is eating, right? Eating calories. And why that was a sin, what about it, was sinful, and some modern parallels that I've been kind of drawing as I've been thinking about, what's trending these days. And obviously the sin of eating the apple was a sin of disobedience. But there's a little bit deeper sense of the story, and I haven't read any primary sources on the church fathers, or at least in relation to this idea. But I've learned of the concept. I think it's from Saint Maximus, Saint Irenaeus, combination of the two, where they talk about man in the garden, and that God actually had always intended for us to partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that there was essentially a path for us to get there, a spiritual maturation path, or however you want to call it. And so the sin in addition to the disobedience, was a sin of essentially taking it for our own before we're ready, before like bypassing order and proper timing and divine order, divine timing. I've been drawing that parallel, so that's a fall, right? And I've been drawing that parallel to you and me as health professionals, me as an ex-health professional, but we have experience with clients and just in general conversations with people. It's like people always want a shortcut to their goals, right? Like someone wants to lose weight. It's like they want to know the secret. Like, what's the secret? What's the one thing? What's the pill I can take? What's the strategy? What's the, you see those like ads you used to see on the side of websites that were like, 5 secret ways to lose belly fat that doctors hate or whatever. People want that stuff and desire it. And I've been kind of seeing that temptation in relation to the temptation of the fruit, because it's desiring to bypass the process of achieving something that is transformative on us in every way, depending on what the goal is, but physically, spiritually, psychologically, and taking it before we're ready, right? Taking the end result before we're ready. And the saints talk about Adam and Eve in the garden as children, and like, you and I are dads, our kids are going to want to eat dessert before they eat dinner, right? They want cookies, but they haven't eaten their PB&J or whatever. We as parents don't refuse them the cookies, but it's like, oh, you have to eat the food first and then you get the dessert, right? That's the proper ordering of things, or else you won't eat the nutritional food and you get a tummy ache, whatever consequences there are. So there's a relation to all that stuff. And there's so many aspects to it. So I know I'm going long-winded here, but there's the ladder of divine ascent, right? The transformational process with which we achieve union with God, right? Theosis is ascending a ladder of virtue where each rung of the ladder is a transformation, right? It's a death of the old man and a renewal, and it's a constant cycle as we are purified in cooperation with God's grace to get closer and closer to him, versus the Tower of Babel, which is like, I'm going to bypass all that and I'm just going to build a huge tower and get to God directly. Right. So I've been seeing, now to the modern day, Ozempic, been hugely popular in the last couple of years. This is a side note, but you had, fat activists or whatever you want to call them, body positivity folks that, were just pushing back on fat shaming and whatever the, terminology they use. And then Ozempic comes out, this magic pill to bypass the transformative process and to just get the thing. And then it's like all of a sudden that just goes away overnight. Every fat celebrity is skinny now. We have the magic pill. Finally, we can stop pretending that we care about this other stuff. But also personally, my experience as a strength coach, I had a lot of people talk to me about their interest in steroids and steroid use. And so it's the same thing. It's like steroid is the Ozempic for men, right? And people want to say, oh, you still got to train hard, you still got to eat right in order to get results. And it's like, okay, look, you can literally just take steroids and nothing else, and you'll increase in muscle mass. Like, it is literally that magical, right? So in any case, all that to say, I wanted to start off this discussion with kind of a, let's say, get your thoughts and your opinions on that based on your own experience and sort of the spiritual implications of desiring or giving to the temptation of these magical solutions for our goals.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different angles to take that. And just out the gate. So the first commandment is pretty universally decried by the fathers as being, thou shalt not eat of that tree, right? However, you're going to get somebody in the comments who says, well, no, it was really be fruitful and multiply. But I'm going to be very clear. St. Basil himself is the one who said that fasting is the first one. So I'm in good company with St. Basil. I'm gonna stick to that one. So we are absolutely on the same
I kind
page,
of
though.
trust the
That
church fathers more than you. Yeah, that meme.
exactly right. So it's like he called it the first one, so I'm gonna run with that. But to that degree, yeah, it's one of those where there are so many different ways that we go reaching for things before we're ready. And one of the other really clear ones is on the psychedelics, right? That's the biggest thing ever since Jordan Peterson of, oh, well, you got a transcendental experience, bro, bucko, and you're able to see into the
You're
noetic
not the
realm.
first Jordan Peterson impression on my podcast.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that. So to that degree, that one is one of the clearest in terms of where we are reaching into things that we really don't understand and probably should be more careful of. And so it's such a common trap, but it's here for a reason, right? Like there is a reason there. What that is, probably not for any of us to know, and probably isn't the route to go. So it's one of the clearest examples prior to even the steroids and the peptide angle. But to that point, it's a situation where when I'm working with clients, it's almost the unsexy version where the first thing I generally do is like we're spending 2 weeks literally just getting that baseline of we're not going to do pretty much anything until we have our foundations in place. Like this is real food. This is sleep. This is how we de-stress, usually involving a lot of the Jesus prayer in consultation with your spiritual father, of course. But my point is, in those moments when you get cut off in traffic and you're about to cuss the person out, I don't think your spiritual fathers would be very angry at me for telling you to say the Jesus prayer. But to that degree, it's a situation where a lot of what I do is the exact opposite, right? Where it's just, we need to slow down and actually understand what we're doing. It's not the 5 things your doctor doesn't want you to know. Yeah. So completely agree that there is a time and a place for everything. And that's it too. That's one of the biggest things I always try to drive home is there's this idea of all or nothing where I have to dive in, whether that's taking the shortcut through the pill or the injection, or it's I need to eat nothing, right? I need to cut out all these different types of foods. We mentioned the carnivore idea, or even on the vegan end, like, well, it's Orthodox friendly, right? It's fasting friendly. So I'm going to be the strictest person ever. And in both cases, or in all those cases rather, you're missing the forest for the trees. You are not actually, you're still putting yourself as the core as opposed to actually turning it over to God, right? We talk about how there's cyclical nature of our fast. It's because we're giving up a good for a greater good. Our goal in that process is being able to be closer to God. So whether that's able to pray more, able to fast more, or able to pray more, able to give more alms rather, versus the idea of, no, this shortcut's going to get me to the goal that I want. That my will, not thy will. And so for me, that's the biggest thing is, why are you looking for that shortcut, right? We were promising that my yoke is easy and my burden is light, right? We'll probably butchered that, but you know what I'm trying to say. But to that degree, Christ promised us, peace, but he didn't give us he never said that there wasn't going to be struggle involved. If anything, it's always that there's struggle. The problem is that a lot of times in the West, we see our struggle, the processes that get us to there, those different rungs on the ladder, right, that you mentioned, but those are our works, and we shouldn't have to do works. Whereas for us, these are the training grounds. This is the ascetical process, whether it's that strength and conditioning. And I love my jiu-jitsu analogy for theosis of just doesn't matter how good you get. Eventually, there's still going to be more growth to happen. And so all of these processes, whether it's the fasting, whether it's the almsgiving, whether it's the mercy, giving mercy, showing mercy, love, all the energies of God that we participate in and through him are growing us closer towards him. And the one that I again really like to drive home, which is what started this little rant and then completely blanked on it, is hamartia, right? That's the biggest problem is hamartia is sin. It means missing the mark. all too often it gets into, I'm driving, or I messed up here, so now I ruined everything. Whereas, no, if you just turn yourself back around and reorient yourself back on that path, and that slow, steady process, that continual ascent every day, that ladder of divine ascent, like you mentioned before, you need to, as you fall off, grab whatever rung you can get onto, even if it's the bottom rung. I don't care. Get back up and keep reorienting yourself and turn yourself back towards Christ. So it's an idea of that slow grind, that progressive overload, to use the strength terminology there. Either case, all of it's that slow grind. Too many people want to go beyond what they can do. And you mentioned before again about how we have our own kids, and I see that a lot with my daughters where they want to help cook, let's say, and now they go towards the stove because they see it, or they go towards the knives, and they don't know any better. You try to instill in them, like, hey, this is a bad idea. Don't touch the stove. Don't grab that knife. Like, you need mama or daddy with you in order to use that. Like, I'm not going to ever turn my kids away from helping me in the kitchen, but there are certain tools that they're not quite ready for. And that's really what comes down to, is that, as you mentioned, God didn't tell us that, no, you cannot ever eat of it. He just said that this is our command for now, is do not do this now. And Adam and Eve were children. They were spiritually and probably to some degree mentally children. And, I can't speak on that dogmatically, but I mean, that's the way I always understood it, is that, yes, physically they were adults, but mentally and spiritually, they were not quite there yet. And definitely not spiritually. But to that degree, it's, hey, you're not ready for this now. Don't go reaching for things that are beyond what you can handle right now. And that just applies to so many aspects of your life.
Yeah, and there's consequences for doing so, right? There's side effects. Of course, eating of the fruit, the side effect was death and corruption. Doing steroids, get side effects of enlarged heart, smaller testicles, roid rage, all those things. So, there's dangers to giving into these temptations and taking these shortcuts. And it goes, or I'm reminded of a Carl Jung quote, which came from Jordan Peterson, or I learned it from Jordan Peterson, which was in relation to psychedelics, but beware of wisdom you didn't earn.
Yeah, wisdom, yep.
Right. So I find that really fascinating. I think that can be applied to anything. Beware of anything you didn't earn. Yep. Because ultimately, if you didn't go through that transformative process, maturation process, to be able to use a stove and wield the knife without hurting yourself, you're going to hurt yourself. Right. So, it's really interesting. We as Orthodox have a completely different view of the physical world and the body that essentially the rest of the world does. And in 2026, I'm seeing, it was always there, but now I'm seeing like an even more overt return to Gnosticism. And it can be a lot, in subtle ways, just kind of how we perceive things, how we perceive the body, how we treat the body and the world around us. Just the disembodied lifestyle that we live of, just like sitting at a desk and working, 8 to 10 hours a day on a computer. Like that's kind of a Gnostic coded lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
So Orthodoxy views the body in a much different way, and there's a strong relationship between the body and soul. It's not like they're two separate things, and one is just kind of just this prison that I'm trapped in, and I hate it because it tempts me, and I have passions that I struggle with, and yada yada. And the soul is the real me, and I need to free my soul of this prison. That's the Gnostic view, right? Whereas the Orthodox view is that our personhood is a union of body and soul, and they cannot, obviously they can be removed from each other, but in the final resurrection, our bodies are going to be transfigured and united with our souls, and so we're going to be in an existence that is in our body, right? and this is a tough thing for people to deal with over history. A lot of people didn't believe in the resurrection because they're like, how can this be, right? And so in that vein, we subjugate the body. I'm speaking as Orthodox. We subjugate the body in the sense that we do not let it control the direction of the soul. So we don't let the body, through the passions of our belly and our loins and our mouths and what have you, to lead the soul down a path of sin and destruction.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't do it in a way that like beats down the body, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
in the kind of the Catholic aesthetic
Self-flagellation idea.
self-flagellation view, right? Like that orthodoxy is not, that's not what we do. We will push the body and fight against its desires for comfort. So like, Orthodox monks will, hold vigil all night, and even though the body is sleepy, and they'll force themselves to stay awake and pray in prayer. And in labor, working all day, eating very light throughout the day. So this is kind of how we approach using the body to participate in the spiritual life. And of course, we have prostrating and
Mm-hmm.
crossing ourselves and kissing icons. Like the way we worship God is through our body.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's not this disembodied, meditating, type of thing. When we quote unquote commune with the Lord, when we commune with the Lord, we're literally consuming, right? Which again parallels the fall, the consumption, of the fruit. So there's this interesting dynamic that is in the Christian ethos of how communion, consumption is a form of union. I mean, it literally is in the word communion, right? So I know you kind of already touched on this, but in your practice and in your perspective as a health professional, or I guess let me word it this way: how do you integrate the pursuit of salvation and the spiritual life in your health goals, both personally and professionally, and through your clients?
Yeah. With lots and lots of discernment, let's say. To be clear, I am not anybody's spiritual father. Yeah, the joke we run always is that I'm not your spiritual father. John, my co-host, is not your spiritual father. So we say John's not your spiritual father. I mean, statistically, he probably is, just not this particular one. But to that degree,
Yeah.
when I'm working with people, it's very much, we're going to try to keep you as close as you can to that Athonite idea, that Athonite ideal of, I'm going to only have bread at 3 p.m, maybe a couple of sips of water. But then you also have to understand that you are not an Athonite monk. You are living out in the world. And I always forget where that quote comes from, but one of the big ones, whether it was St. Paisios or Porphyrios of modern day, who was basically that every 3 prayers, every prayer you give is worth about 1,000 on Athos, because you're living out in the hecticness of the world. And to bring back to St. Basil again, in his longer rules, he states it very explicitly that your age, your occupation, your traveling, your physical condition, there's so many factors that go into what your fast looks like. And so at the end of the day, the fast is for you. But yeah, there's the one case, there's the monk who is just so prideful that his abbot sends him down to the town and makes him eat a whole bunch of meat during the fast. I mean, even though they don't eat meat at all throughout the year, and he has to eat the meat in the town square in front of everybody just because the pride has gotten to him. Because even, that's the other one too, that even the demons fast, right? And they're going to fast significantly better than you can ever do it. So all of that to say is that we don't want to allow the way we eat to become our identity and to use that becomes a source of pride. And I see that a lot where people are trying to adhere to the fast, and it's like, that's great, please do. Like, adhere to the strictest fast that you can handle. Pick up the heaviest cross that you can. But then there's a lot of people who have health conditions that's really not possible to the strictest layer of the law. And while I don't want everybody doing this, usually it starts on the range of whether it's fish or eggs or dairy. That's usually the first allowances that a priest will allow, where it's, hey, if you need to have an egg, that then okay. It's just a matter of there's certain conditions where like, no, you need the more protein, and maybe you're allergic to shellfish. Maybe I'm really anti-soy as a general rule for most people, particularly as the anchor protein. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to yell at you if you eat the miso, if you eat the tofu in your miso soup at the restaurant, but I wouldn't go out and buying the Pharisee meats is the word that was given to me. I'm still not sure
That's hilarious.
Which priest's wife gave it to me. No one claimed it. I actually commented, I tagged them all in it. I don't know who gave it to me, but I used to call them Franken meats. Now I call them Pharisee meats. But all of that to say, the soy as the predominant one, not a big fan. I do not like Satan as the primary protein source. There's way too many issues surrounding wheat between the enrichment processes, the glyphosate spray they're using to desiccate it. The one that was the biggest buzz for the longest time was the gluten and or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Just overall, there's too much issues with hyper overprocessed wheat. And so I don't like the Satan as the, and yes, I know it's Satan, but I don't like that as the primary protein source. So yeah, at that point, there's only so much, so many lentils you can eat and so much rice and pea protein powder you can drink. So if you have a condition that necessitates it, or if you have somebody who has serious GI problems and they just cannot handle that much grains and legumes as the bulk of their diet for 48 days straight, for 40 days straight, for 14 days, for those of us who just left the Dormition and those of you who have just entered the Dormition fast. Either way, even if it's just 14 days, yeah, you can probably get away with Wednesday, Friday fasting, whether it's just you don't eat that day or, you maybe have a little bit of things that you can handle. But if you have a serious GI condition and you're not addressing it otherwise, there's going to need to be some kinds of allowances. So you're not going to be the strictest person. Now, all that to say, pick up the heaviest cross for your season. And so whether that changes or not, but when you are able to pick up those heavier crosses, again, under the guidance of a spiritual father, doesn't mean, hey, I know what I want to do. I'm going to do a 7-day water fast now. It's like, sure, maybe, but maybe that's just pride. Maybe it is what your body needs. Maybe it is going to be super beneficial for you, but maybe it's pride. You have that conversation with your spiritual father and see what's happening here. And with that, when we're bringing it back to the idea of the Gnosticism that is very much so rampant these days. And yeah, we see that on both sides, whether that be the secular or the woo crowd. And that's a big idea of what I was trying to do with both my doctoral thesis and then my book. That was the realization I came to. So, my father was a naturopathic doctor, and again, I was in the ancestral world. I was in the fitness and training world, the MMA world. So I was always adjacent to the alternative, occult, esoteric kind of ideas, the Eastern religious ideas. And I've talked about that a couple of times. When I was doing Japanese jiu-jitsu as a kid, we had to kneel before the Kamidana, which literally means like the sky gods, the sky heaven. And so, and we had to bow, and there was a poem, and I actually was able to remember it live while I was recording one time. I'm not going to repeat it again because I looked into what it actually meant. I'm like, it's probably some really squirrely stuff here. And looking back at it, yeah, it is. But the poem we had to read, this thing, it was a Shinto poem, and all I had to say. So yeah, so I was involved in that way, where it was bowing down to Shinto gods as part of martial arts. So what I was trying to do, both again with my doctoral work and then with the book and everything, is like, there's some squirreliness out there. And in both of those fronts, whether it's the secular idea, the mindfulness idea, or that then moves into the transhumanist idea, or on the other side, the yoga meditation idea, you're trying to escape the body because the body is ontologically bad. Whereas as Orthodox Christians, we believe that we are embodied. The resurrection is the clearest point of that, is that he has his physical body that he had before. That's why St. Thomas had to go and poke him, right? So it's there. He ate with them. Did he have to? No, but he still is embodied. And so the bodily resurrection demonstrates that it is supremely important to us. Well, supreme is a little bit too strong of a word. The soul is supreme. There's still a hierarchy there. But my point is that it is incredibly important. And while we are called to be stewards of our body, the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. We're called to be stewards. We're not called to elevate it, right? Because that goes into worshiping the creator versus the created, right? And that is the biggest temptation I see on that flip side of people who want to take it to the strictest level. Some of them might be pious. Some of it might be like, no, I understand this is the fast. And, I get that. That's very much, I can resonate with that of having been, I did a little bit of powerlifting back in college in terms of competitions, but most of my experiences in martial arts between wrestling, judo, MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, all of that. So I understand how to cut weight. I understand how to manipulate the body like very, very well in terms of weight regulation. And for specific goals, for specific times, that's one thing. But when that then crosses over to, no, I'm going to start becoming vainglorious and proud of my achievements and my ability to cut the weight, that's where it gets a little squirrely. And so the point on that is, for me, the fast wasn't the most difficult thing. You can start doing that though, where you're saying, I'm the best faster ever, and I'm going to try to hold it to the strictest letter, versus I'm going to use this as a tool to unite myself back towards God.
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you mentioned having pride in how you eat.
Mm-hmm.
I never really made that parallel, but the Pharisaic pride of I'm such a good faster or whatever. It's the same pride as like a fatfluencer or what do they call it? Mukbang, where they just like eat. And it's like,
actually, I'm not familiar with that one. I'm that one's past my time. Apparently,
it's like eating ASMR or something like that. There's just fat people eating stuff on video, and it became hugely popular like years ago. But there's like there's like pride in the opposite sense, right? It's like pride in the gluttony.
Yep.
But I've always said this because this is actually part of the body aesthetic, or why I created the body aesthetic, is that it's not just fat folks, it's also bodybuilders. Like the amount of excess in bodybuilding is just off the charts.
Yeah.
And a 220 pound bodybuilder has to eat however many 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories a day in order to sustain that mass, and that's like 2 people's worth of calories. And I always throw my friend under the bus. I'm not going to name his name, but he was one of those guys that was always asking me about steroids, because he was always a little overweight, always wanted to get in shape, work out here and there, but wouldn't really like take it seriously in diet. So he always wanted that magic pill, and he would just in his free time watch videos of just bodybuilders eating, and like I don't know if it was inspirational or what, but it was like they're just like buckets of chicken and rice or whatever they're eating. And
I'm not gonna lie, I did used to love The Rock's meal days where he'd eat the 6,000 calories in a day, and it was like the whole stack of pancakes, and it was this and it was that. And mind you, at that point I was still strictly paleo, and so I didn't eat any wheat at that point, but I appreciated it. So
I mean, it's entertaining for the shock value, but like spiritually speaking, like why is that different than the 300 pound obese person eating equivalent amount? It's like, okay, that guy does it for the goal of muscle for vanity, and the other one does it for the goal of gluttony. It's like they're not really any better than each other.
No, absolutely. And at the end of the day, they still come to the same root, of even the self-loathing that's associated with the gluttony of, obesity. Even that, there's still pride, right? That's one of the things the fathers are, when they talk about philautia, which is the love of self. On the same side of that, the same token is the self-hatred. It's still love, right? It's still a love of self. It's that paradox of, I'm still focused on me in this, right? Of I hate myself so much, but I'm still focused there. And that's the key, is in any of the cases of the passions, it's still going to resolve around you being the core focus versus everything everything else. And now, so you said you're not going to throw your friends under the bus. I will absolutely throw my friends under the bus. And so we had a couple of times we had on my good friend Gavin, and then we've had on Father Michael Butler, and they both have competed in bodybuilding shows. And I do think there is an area where that discipline and the core focus of what a bodybuilder does can actually, the training and everything else can still fit within an aesthetic framework. It's just a matter of, does that become the core focus of your identity? It's the same thing with any kind of athlete, or just regardless of what your vocation is. Like, you have to account to it, to what you are doing. So if you are, a professional bodybuilder, then it's like, yeah, you can still be an Orthodox Christian. Yes, you understand that there is a vanity component to it. But as long as at the end of the day, you're giving it up to God, like, I'm not going to begrudge somebody on that. It's when it's, you're an accountant and you're following that bodybuilding program, and that's all, you're doing that as your side project, and you're not even competing. Let's say, we can put it even further, because at least with competition, there's a degree of, I'm trying to make myself better overall. It's one of those where, for me, if you're an accountant or whatever, I'm throwing them under the bus. Well, the tax collectors were a problem in the Bible, right? So,
Yeah, bankers.
but in biblical times, those were the lowest of the low. But all that to say, there's a difference between using that as a goal, having that metric as a way to say, I'm going to improve my physical self as a stewardship. I'm going to get stronger to be of service, right? Following that program, if you're actually going and then implying that in your life beyond just the vanity, I don't necessarily see the problem with it. It's just a lot of people, right, are just, no, I need to look the best I've ever looked, and that makes me, better than somebody? Mm-mm. So that's where it gets a little bit swirly. And so,
yeah, that's most people's goals. I mean, that was part of the body aesthetic thing, because I took the strength approach, right? I'm a strength coach, and I'm a small guy. Like, I'm not like a, big beefy bro, but I was a powerlifter. My approach to powerlifting was like very different than everyone else's approach, which they pursued raw strength, my approach was to pursue relative strength. So how strong could I be, while at the same time competing with that as low of a weight class as I could possibly compete in? So my focus was purely on the strength aspect, and I tried to turn that into a brand to encourage young men to maybe not entirely go that route, but at least kind of veer them off the path of going down the bodybuilding vanity route, because like every young man wants to look like a bodybuilder, right? Because they think it's going to get the girls, and they're going to get all this attention.
Superman, right? Yeah,
exactly. And as you know, there's their muscle size and strength are interrelated, but they're not exactly correlated, in the sense that like the way you train is for muscle growth is completely different than the way you train for getting stronger. And there's plenty of huge bodybuilders that are not that strong. So that there's definitely, and this kind of goes into one of the other points I listed on our bullet points, is the sins of the fitness industry, which is a title of one of my oldest videos. When I didn't know what to do with YouTube, and I was just putting an iPhone up and just talking. But obviously the biggest sin of the industry, and when I say industry, I don't just mean the professional industry, but also just how people view health and fitness. Like the average young man that wants to look nice and attract women and whatever his other goals are. It's all for the purpose of vanity, like you said, right? It's to look a certain way, and usually it's to look like someone they admire, right? What they don't know, and obviously I'm speaking about young men because I'm a man, so I don't know the equivalent for women. But for a young man, has Arnold, a poster of Arnold in his room or whatever, doesn't necessarily know or appreciate enough the fact that what he's looking at is not a real human body. It's not a natural human body, right? It's not a body that was produced purely on through natural means. And so this is why the temptation of steroids is so strong in young men, is because they're looking around and they're seeing all these guys that are giant, and in their perception, those are the kinds of guys that get women. But the reality is not necessarily that way. But in any case, and so when they pursue that, they're like, okay, I'm buying all the diet programs they're selling me. I'm buying all the workout plans they're selling me. I'm following it. I'm doing all the steps. And then, month after month, maybe year after year, they look in the mirror and they're like, I don't look remotely like that guy, right? Like something's wrong, and this is where the temptation of steroids becomes really strong. And that this is the temptation of the shortcut, the temptation of the fruit, right? And to me, that was like one of the biggest problems to be addressed through the brand of the body aesthetic, and like I said, I'm not necessarily doing that, but that problem exists today very rampantly, because this is not an accurate statistic, but I remember reading something that there was an estimation that the average man under 30, or like between 18 and 30 in the gym, about 40% of them are using steroids. And this is based on like actual, people admitting it, or like, discovering, steroid dealer rings and all that stuff. Yeah. So almost half of guys in the gym are using steroids, which is insane to me, but it shows you how strong the temptation of the shortcut is. And part of the strength of that temptation is because they're being sold a lie, essentially, right? On the poster on their wall, they're being sold a lie. And I'm saying poster on the wall, but now it's, reels on Instagram, or, accounts that you follow on Instagram. So, so on that note, like, what's your advice for young men who, desire to be stronger, desire to look good, desire to be healthy, especially, for young men that are, desiring to get married in the church and become a strong father and leader, as you are? What's kind of your advice to them in navigating this vain hellscape that we've created with social media?
No, absolutely. And so, a couple of points there in terms of, it's not just the vanity. I mean, that's a major part of it. The gluttony's there, and even the reverse gluttony. There's also, though, the lust angle, right? You said a lot of it is for looking for a potential mate. A lot of times they're not looking for a wife; they're looking for a mate, and we'll say it that way to be a little bit more family friendly. But to that degree, there's very much a lust component in the fitness industry, on both ends, both in why am I doing this myself? Like, well, it's a lustful thought, and what am I engaging with on those reels, right? How explosively popular are the Fitspo girls? Those are always, I've carefully crafted my algorithm. They still find their way weaseling in, and it's like, nope, swipe, get out of here, right? And I'm not the guy that's sitting there on the reels all day, but my point is, to the degree that I am on social media, it still comes through, and it's like, there's very much a lust component there. And so that's one. Two, as to the performance enhancement, it's not just the vanity aspect. There is the pride of it as well, because it's a very big aspect in the jiu-jitsu community as well, right? There's a running joke that if you want to be a world champion, you need to have two things. You need to be autistic and you need to be on steroids. That's the way you win a world championship in jiu-jitsu. And so, I mean, there is a degree to which that's true. I'm not going to lie, but
I feel like that's true of like most things.
Right.
I did jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, for maybe two or 3 years, and some Muay Thai. So
nice, very cool. Well, and then the beauty of Muay Thai is that the smaller you are, the better for the most part. There's not many big fighters on that front, but I mean, that's also the selling point of jiu-jitsu, right? Is that size doesn't matter. I mean, the gym that I train and teach out of here in Arkansas is called TOSS, which is technique over size and strength. And so, nice. All of that to say that for that young man who is being tempted by that, who sees the Arnold, or sees what are the modern equivalents, Jason Momoa or something, whoever is around these days, and they see those guys and they're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to look like that. And there's nothing wrong per se with saying, I want to look stronger. I want to be healthier. I want to get better. I want to be a steward for the body that God has given to me. It's when you start really looking and saying, hey, I've done everything I could to get to that, and I still am not getting bigger. And you just need to be bigger. And so now I'm going to, maybe shirk some of my responsibilities with the fast, or I'm going to start looking for those shortcuts. You start asking, hey, what's going on here? It's a question you have to ask internally on that front of, what is my goal? Why do I need to be that big? Why? Like, is it about being strong so that I can be a protector for my wife and my kids? Because that's a big thing. Is predators, they have a type. They're very explicit on that in terms of, if the husband and the dad looks weak, well, that's the target right there. Or if, God forbid, he sees you as that target and you don't know what you're doing, whether you're physically capable from having trained or just strong enough to deal with it, address it, like, it's an avenue of, you're not fulfilling your fatherly role. So you do want to be strong. You do want to be prepared. But if that's not your goal, all right, let's move to the next one. And what's the goal? Oh, well, I need to be, or another one, or rather another possible goal that could be beneficial would be, I want to be of service around my parish, whether it be different projects that have to be done in the parish itself, everything from moving things around to cleaning to otherwise, or maybe love of neighbor. I have some elderly parishioners who have some issues. Maybe they have to move. Maybe they had a fall, being able to help them do things. So what is that strength for? And, Brother Emmanuel always talks about that a lot, of strength is for service. And we borrowed that line, who beat to death. And that's the point, is, are you being a steward for God where you are loving him and neighbor? And so you're able to provide for other people because of that. You have an enhanced capacity to be strong. If that's not the goal, then you need to reorient. You need that metania. You need to actually focus on what you are doing it for and turn yourself back. If it's just the vanity, because like I said, I mentioned, I have friends who are in the bodybuilding world, and for them, it's not just about, I'm going to just become the biggest, baddest guy ever on that. It's, the discipline that for them that it instills is a benefit for them. They're not trying to be, Jay Cutler or Ronnie Coleman. So to that degree, or Arnold for that matter, right? So it's the focus, like all things, right? Glory to God in all things, right? We're called to have our focus on him. So for the young man at home, ask yourself that question. What is it I'm doing this for? Am I getting strong for it to improve my pride, or am I doing it to be able to be of service to other people?
Yeah, my priest, because I struggle with this myself, and he'll say, like, we basically, as man, we have two choices, or two paths, right? We can choose James Bond or Christ, or pick your saint, right? And obviously, every man in a worldly sense wants to be like James Bond, cool, calm, collected, gets the girl, competent, all that. But James Bond is a point in time that is going to be forgotten to the annals of history, right? Versus the saints that we speak about and read their stories, over thousands of years and thousands of years to come. So, which one makes more of an impact? Right.
100%. I mean, we've set the years to, before and after Christ, not to before and after James Bond. So
yeah, exactly. The one man changed history.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Dr. Michael, for coming on the show. That was awesome conversation. It's always a pleasure and a joy to talk to another health professional. And appreciate everyone for watching. Thanks so much. Links to Orthodox Health are below, orthodoxhealth.com. And you can find Dr. Michael on YouTube at Dr. Michael Christian. In any case, I'll have the links below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Godspeed.
Thanks for having me.